Welcome to another episode of Cheers Dears. Today we are joined by Jill G. Hall, whose novels are about women connected by vintage finds searching for their place in the world. Jill, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, I was able to meet Jill through the Warwick's anniversary party. It was their 125th birthday. Warwick's is an absolutely wonderful local bookstore here in San Diego and is a really honor and treat to get to interact with so many different people over our love of books. And that is where Jill gave me a list of her recommendations of books that she enjoyed. And I also learned that she was an author as well. So, of course, had to bring her on into Cheers Dears. So, Jill, you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and, of course, about your signature drink?
Okay, well, my signature drink is chai tea latte. And I get up every morning and that's what I have. I don't drink coffee. And then I get my chai tea latte and I crawl back in bed with my journal and I write. And that's my writing practice. Um, I was a teacher for over 20 years, inner city here in San Diego. And then after I taught for 20 years, the pendulum swung away from the arts, which was what I specialized in. Then I decided to take a break and I took a leave of absence and I started writing. And I thought maybe I would write children's books or a memoir about being a classroom teacher, but that's not what happened at all. I started to go to a Tuesday group where we write intuitively to prompts, and it's timed, and characters appeared out of nowhere onto the page, and I just kept going. And now, years later, 15 years later, and three books, here we are. Yes.
Your characters were a part of your soul and they were just waiting for the opportunity to come out.
Yes, yes, that's what I think. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned you're an artist, and I just finished reading The Green Lace Corset, and I absolutely loved it. And one of your characters is an artist, and she teaches as well. So, when you're writing, do you find that a lot of your inspiration comes from yourself and your own life experiences?
Yes, that's very true. So, Anne Mcfarland is a character that's in all three of my novels. It's called actually the Anne Mcfarland series, and she's a San Francisco artist and finds a vintage. She has the vintage find that she finds, and then someone from the past also owns that or interacts with that thing. So, in the Green Lace Corset, she becomes an instructor at the Museum of modern art in San Francisco and has to come up with lots of different art projects. And one of my favorite art projects is to do mosaic horseshoes. And so I had her do that with her students. But when I do it, a lot of times the room becomes a complete mess because things fall all over and the kids don't get along. So I had the obstacles there. And I'm also I do mosaics a lot. I use found objects, and just like Anne, my character in my stories. And so she's always trying to do the best she can. Some of the behavior problems that she had with her students, I also have had. And it was really a fun way to be able to tie in my past as a teacher in with my books.
Life inspires our fiction for sure. And
Yes.
I love that. And I want to ask, how did you originally get into mosaics?
Well, I was still teaching, and I was downtown one night at a party and left the party, and I wandered into an art gallery, and I fell in love with this table. I just loved it, and I went home, and I dreamt about it that night. And then I got up the next morning and said, I'm going to buy it. And I drove downtown and I bought it. And I found out that the woman who made it taught workshops. So I took two Sunday workshops and learned how to do this technique. And then I started to get obsessed. And I started out with a tray, and then I started out with a table, and then I started to take over the whole kitchen. And then I had to move to another room because we weren't all getting along, and it was just really uh, fun. And then I just kept going, and now I've done fireplaces and big murals, and just kept going.
That's incredible that this art has just become a part of you. And it
Mhm.
sounds like, it's not just for you, it's something others get to enjoy and that we get to enjoy through your stories as well. It's really quite inspirational.
Yes, thank you, thank you.
Now, in the Green Lace Corset, we have another character, Sue Ann, and she's the character that takes place in the past. And it's sort of this Wild West look back at the past. And I this is actually the third quasi western I've read in the last year, and I'm finding more and more that I'm actually really enjoying them, which I honestly just kind of stumbled upon them, and I love the interactions between her and her captor. And could you tell us a little bit more about those two and maybe even the historical influences that inspired their story?
Well, Sally Sue Sullivan is a Midwestern girl, and she was kidnapped on a train by a bank robber. And she'd actually been in the bank when it happened, when the bank was robbed. And then later he sees her on a train, and he takes her to northern Arizona in Flags. And so when I was working on the story, I had to figure out, because in the first scene of the book, Anne Mcfarland goes to northern Arizona on a road trip, the present day artist. And so I had to figure out, okay, I want them to somehow be in the same place. And so I wanted to have the train go, and I'm going, okay, where would the train end up? And the
Mm.
train, I had to look up historically in the 1850s, 1860s, where would the train go? And it would stop in Flagstaff, Arizona. Well, it was very exciting when I realized that, because I um, had Flagstaff be a place in my first novel, The Black Velvet Coat. And so it was really great because I love Flagstaff. I went to school there, so I know Flagstaff really well, and I've always loved the nature of it. So that's how I ended up having it happen. Then I really enjoy the Wild West concept, and had a lot of fun writing that. And the romance between Sally Sue and Cliff was just amazing because I didn't know what was going to happen. I write intuitively, and as I kept writing, I ended up they were really attracted to each other. And I realized later that the Stockholm syndrome, where you become enamored and influenced by the person that's your captor. So it ended up being quite the romance, didn't it?
Yeah, I love enemies to lover arcs. I think they're
Yeah.
a lot of fun, and we can do a lot with those. And it's just
Mhm.
it's a good storyline to have with our character development, and it's just a fun to read and it's a lot of fun to write as well.
Yes, yes, yes. It was really a great time.
Now, Sally Sue also had a very overbearing mother, which I thought was really interesting. And as I was reading along, I thought, in a way, her getting kidnapped, and it was a part of the story arc as well. It was just so interesting to see how every time she would do something, she had her mother's head and voice in the back of her head. And I liked that throughout the story, we saw that less and less and less and less as she was growing as a and discovering herself and her own strength. And, not trying to do too many spoilers, but I just love that evolution of a character who's been thrown into a situation where they didn't expect this to happen. This was the day they were supposed to have, and these are their troubles that are on their shoulders. And even though the day changed drastically, the troubles that they had are still there and still a part of them. And that's just such a great story being told because she grew out of that as she
Hmm.
went along.
Hmm. 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 And I think that's very common with many, many women, and probably men too, where we do hear our mother's voices for many, many years. But it's really beautiful when you're free of that. and it takes a long time to work through it. And like, there are many people that don't ever get through that and past that. So I'm really happy that Sally Sue was able to move on from her overbearing mother. And at the end, it was really great because she was at a crossroads where she had to decide where she was going to go. And
Mm-hmm.
I was really, really glad to say, I don't want to do any spoiler alerts, but so I was really glad that it ended the way it did instead of, you know, what could have happened.
So now, Jill, you're a very active member of the writing community here in San Diego, and you actually mentioned it briefly about the paper bag writing group that you're a part of. You want to tell us a little bit more about that and your involvement with San Diego Writers Inc.?
Yes. Well, we have a group called Tuesday Brown Bag, which has been going for 27, 28 years. And so many of us writers have been taking turns over the years, depending on where we are in the process, facilitating it. So we meet every Tuesday, and we used to meet at Liberty Station where our site is, but when COVID hit, we transferred it to Zoom, and now we're going to keep it on Zoom because people have been coming from all over the country and writing with us. So the way it works is we read the rules for writing, which basically there aren't any rules, and then from there we give a prompt, and then we all write together at the same time, and it's timed. So we usually it's about 17 seems to be the magic number, and then whoever wants to read can read, but you can pass also, and it's not for critique. It's just for getting your pen to page. And I really and most of us write by hand. I believe in the heart hand connection, where when you're writing the first draft, it goes from your brain into your heart and onto the page. And I pretty much skip the brain and just go from my heart to my hand. And that's where the kernels of all of my novels, most of the scenes in my novels have come from, is writing that way. And then later I take the journals and I type up the pages that I feel are worthy or would fit really well into my stories. And then I go back later and put together the outline. I write all out of sequence.
It's just where the muses tap you. I mean, it's what we go
Yes,
with, right?
exactly, exactly. Yes.
Now, I was lucky and honored to be a part of the brown bag lunch or the brown bag write-in, and I'd been struggling for a while to get my creative juices flowing, and that's really unusual for me. I've had a very habitual writing practice for years, years and years. I would almost always write in the evening time after the day was done. When I was settling down, I would just sort of check everything else out and just sit there and write or type away. And then I recently quit my day job, if you will, and have taken on writing and my small press, developing my small press full time. So now that's all I do. And at the end of the day, there was nothing left of me creatively to put that pen to the page or to start typing. And that was really hard. And I do have deadlines, of course, and I have other projects I need to get done with my writing, but I had hit a wall and my writing wasn't as genuine. It was more technical. It wasn't a story and it was hurting my writing. And then I attended your brown bag and it just reminded me of, oh yes, this is it, this is that feeling. And it was a delightful sprint and an exercise, and I'm trying to maintain every day now of just 15 minutes, just get that pen to the page or just work on it for 15 minutes. Don't edit, don't worry about spelling. And it's really helped to jumpstart my writing again.
Oh,
and
good. I'm glad to
and
hear
I
that.
yeah, I really want to thank you for that because it's made a huge difference. And I had a big conversation. Well, I had a conversation with a couple of people from the San Diego Horror Writing Association this past weekend, and that actually came up because we were talking about the challenges of writing and all this and that, and I brought up your exercise of don't worry about the spelling, Don't worry about the grammar. Cross things out later. Just go. Just don't think about it. Just write. And as we were talking, other people were like, "Oh yeah, that when we do handwrite, that's when the creative juices really start flowing, and it's so much more intimidating. It seems to just type out on a screen because you've got those little red squiggles coming at you, or whatever it is. Grammarly starts judging you, and just having the pen and a piece of paper, no judgment, no rules, just writing.
Yes, I find that if I try to compose on the computer, I'm very much tempted to go back and edit as I go. But if I'm doing it by hand, I don't do that. And also another thing that really helps is to set the timer. So
Hmm.
when I'm writing alone, I set my timer to how long I want to write. And then I have to stay in my seat and focus on that. I can't check my phone. I turn off my phone. I don't check my email. That's all I do. And so setting a timer can be really helpful also.
I like that because that helps with the accountability for ourselves. And writing is such a solitary activity most of the time. We just have ourselves to be like, "Hey, you doing it? Are you writing?" And most of
Mm-hmm,
the time, a lot of us are not, and just
mm-hmm.
because of life or what have you. But just having that little time carved out for the day, that little timer as a goal, not worrying about word count or
Yeah,
structure or anything like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But writing together with other people is really helpful because if I have to write a scene that's really difficult to write, if I have other people that are around me, even if we're on Zoom, I keep going past that point where if I was alone, I would just stop.
Hmm.
So it's really powerful to also write with other people.
And I don't know how many. I haven't really encountered many writing groups where critique isn't a part of the format. And that's always been sort of intimidating because, in the back of your head, you're sitting there thinking, oh God, well, is it going to be good enough? Is this something I really want to share? But that was one of the things I really appreciated about your group as well, is that you just read it if you want to. It's not something you
Mhm,
have to do,
mhm,
and that the others involved in the group just clap and support it because you
mhm.
did a thing. you
Yes,
you
yes.
completed a writing section, and I think that's so supportive and so wonderful. I look forward to hearing about more groups like that.
Well, we have a lot of groups like that through San Diego Writers Inc. We have a lot of retreats that are day retreats or a couple of hours. We have a winter solstice retreat coming up with Judy Reeves, who is my mentor and one of the founders of San Diego Writers Inc. And you can go to san diego writers.org and check out their website and see about all the great classes and workshops that we have. But we at a retreat where you work for more than just an hour, you can just really get into the groove. And I a lot of times will write a scene, and then the next prompt I'll keep going with the same prompt. So I highly recommend that you check that out.
And listeners, I'll definitely have the link to San Diego Writers Inc. included in the description box below, so all you have to do is look right there and give it a click.
Great, good, thank you.
Now, Jill, do you have any other advice you'd like to share with authors who are either just starting out or who've been going at it a while and are just kind of hitting sort of a writer's block or a funk of sorts?
Yeah, well, I think there are two things that I like to recommend. Number one is find your tribe, find other people that are writing similar to what you're writing, and start meeting with them and being supportive. And the other thing is to develop your daily writing practice and try to write every single day. And I always recommend prompts. Judy's book, I mentioned Judy Reeves, her book, A Writer's Book of Days, has a prompt for every day of the year. And that's my favorite book to recommend, A Writer's Book of Days. And so I recommend that you write every day. And I write usually 6 days a week. even if it's just a paragraph. At least I get something down.
It counts.
Yeah, yeah, it counts. It counts. And then also to find your tribe and be careful who you share your work with. So I don't share any of my first drafts with anyone until I've made it the best it can be.
Hmm.
I might read something at a group where I've just written it, but for critique, I never share it till I feel I've made it the best it could be.
Now, do you do that because you find that if you go in too early for critiques, I might either start doubting the piece or just pulling it apart from your original vision,
Well, I
or
think it's because it's a waste of time. Because I want it to be the best it could be, and then I want feedback on how I can make it even better. I love to be critiqued. I love my work to be critiqued, and so I just really want to make it really tight before I have anybody look at it. Um, that's my when I've always been like that, part of it when I started writing was perfectionism, and I did not know what I was doing, and I learned really the craft of writing through reading critique groups. The first group that I was in, uh, they were so patient with me because I didn't know anything. I didn't know about point of view. I didn't understand a lot of different mechanics that we need to know as authors. But they were really patient and smart, and I learned a lot.
I totally want to echo that. I mean, I can't even express how much my writing has grown in the last year alone from being involved, or 2 years, being involved in the various writing groups and writing community and having a writing buddy that I trust who I can
Mm-hmm.
bounce off ideas on and be like, does this make sense in my genre? And having that tribe to surround us of trusting people who get it,
Mm-hmm.
who know what it's like to wake up in the middle of the night with a story idea.
Yes.
Those are our people, and it's very good to surround ourselves with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love to read other people's work and help them make it better too. That's really fulfilling to me.
I totally agree with that. Anyway, we can help our fellow authors. So, Jill, we now have a listener question. This question comes in from Ronnie, one of my newsletter and very supportive members of the podcast community here. She would like to know, what are your favorite books to read? And what do you find, or is there anything new that you've found that you never would have thought of before?
Well, I read a lot of historical fiction because my books are dual timeline historical fiction. And so that's my genre and my favorite to read. Um, but I'm in a book club. And the thing I love about being in a book club, we've been together for over 10 years, is that I'm exposed to other books that I wouldn't normally pick up and read. And so that is really fun for me. And I always look for the positive things in every book. And very rarely do I not finish a book. Um,
Hmm.
I have this, if I do have this thing that someone told me a long time ago, one of my instructors, if you read 50 pages and you still aren't into it and you still don't like it, then stop. And so I do that, but that happens very rarely. So, yeah. So that's my genres. Historical fiction, my
I
favorite.
really I really like that rule of the 50 pages. That's a really interesting sort of stamp to put on a book, because sometimes it takes a little longer for stories to get started, but if you hang in there, there might be something that surprises you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
Our next author or next listener question comes from Tiffany, and she would like to know if the quarantine of last year helped or hindered your writing development, and what did you do to help you through any of the quarantine blues?
That's a great question. So the hardest thing was the Green Lace Corset. My third novel came out in October, and I had a lot of exciting events planned, and they were all canceled. or postponed or transferred to Zoom. And I'd had a green lace corset made, outfit with a little skirt that's actually on the corset's actually on the book cover. I own that. And I was going to wear it to my launch party, and then it got canceled. So it was very sad. But I found I loved being home all the time because I was able to really get a lot of work done and a lot of writing. So I was working on my fourth novel and and it's not part of the series, but it's historical fiction. So I used that time to research. I couldn't go to the archives and do research or to libraries, but I was able to get a lot online. And and some books I was able to order, but I really was able to go deep. And I also, one thing that really helped is I spent a lot of time in my garden, and I started to go back to doing some sketching in watercolor of my botanicals, which was really fun. I hadn't done that in years. So, yeah.
Finding positivity in the darkness, right?
Yes, yes. Wrote a lot of poetry too, because they're of my emotions. All of us had so many emotions. So that was really helpful. I'm also a poet, so I was able to get a lot of my emotions out that way.
What a healthy outlet. I mean, 2020 was a difficult time.
Yeah, it was. Yes, yes.
So I'm glad to hear you were able to find several creative outlets. And hopefully, listeners, if you're hearing this and you're going through a difficult time, maybe look into poetry or mosaics or something you haven't tried before that maybe Jill's now inspired you to do, and see if that becomes your thing, because we all need something. And even if you think writing is exclusively your thing, you'd be surprised. I mean, I recently discovered terrariums because I just needed a hobby that wasn't related to writing so that I could just, express myself in a different way and find clarity. And I love that you're painting your plants. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Alrighty, Jill. Well, the last question is, where can the people find you and what's next to expect?
Okay. Well, my website is jillghall.com. And I'm also on Facebook and very active on Facebook, so you can friend me. I also have an author page, but I'm finding the way technology is now, I'm pretty much focused on my friend page. So go ahead and check in with me there. And next Saturday, I'm going to be at the North Park Book Festival signing books at the San Diego Writers Ink table. And we're also going to be having an open house Saturday evening at Inspirations Gallery in Barrack 16 at Liberty Station. All of the art galleries in Barrack 16 are going to be open. We have a lot of great artists there. And I actually have in Inspirations Gallery, our space, San Diego Writers Ink space, I have 2 of my mosaics up. So come by. A lot of authors are going to be there. We're going to sell and sign books and talk to other writers.
Oh, that's fantastic, and it sounds like so much fun, and cannot wait to see you this Saturday, December 11th at the North Park Book Fair. And Jill, again, thank you so much for joining us here tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
A huge thank you goes to my sponsors, Salbomb and Don W. And to see how you can help support this podcast, head on over to buymeacoffee.com/sfaxon.